Hello, welcome everyone to another live question and answer show with Promethean Action. My name is Adam Sturman. I'm a producer with Promethean Action, and I'm joined with Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd from Promethean Action and Promethean PAC. So today's show, they're definitely coming for Elon Musk. So in the last few days, I'm just going to do a quick recap of what's going on with Musk because there's an added element here which I didn't even know about until recently. So everyone's going to know, first off, that the French police raided the X offices in Paris. But it actually wasn't just the French police. Europol was also there. And the Paris prosecutor has now summoned Musk personally to appear in April. But here's the weird thing. So the Paris prosecutor has now also announced that they're quitting X entirely. So the Paris prosecutor used to have an account on X. They're quitting that entirely and moving over their official communications over to LinkedIn. But that's not all. So here's the extra thing. In the United States now, this happened 24 hours after Musk was raided in Paris. In the United States, a federal judge has now ruled that Musk must sit for a deposition over his role at Doge, specifically the dismantling of USAID. And Musk lawyers tried to invoke the Apex Doctrine, which is a rule that allows high-ranking government officials to avoid deposition, but the judge said no. He ruled that Musk can't claim to be a high-ranking government official when it suits him. So that happened with Musk in the last few days, and that all happened within 48 hours. Okay, so let's move over to Britain. Okay, so Mandelson and Starmer. Okay, so supposedly, I woke up this morning, scrolled through my news feeds. Now Starmer is not only publicly admitting that Mandelson lied repeatedly about his connections to Epstein, Starmer's own Labour MPs are now saying that he may not even survive the weekend. One minister told the Telegraph that the mood in the party is febrile and mutinous. And there are unconfirmed reports circulating that Starmer could resign within hours. So Starmer could be gone by the end of the day. I think that's pretty good. Okay, and let's bring this back to the United States. So I'm sure you guys saw our last show, last midweek update, where we brought up this new strategic minerals deal. And he's actually trying to open up the strategic minerals deal to our allies too. He wants us to be a market of strategic minerals for American allies. That's all being negotiated and worked out right now. So I think that sets a good background for today's show. We have so much more to cover, including the midterm elections, which is the backdrop to all of this. Because if we don't win this midterm elections, we're going to be in big trouble in 2028, guys. So as you're coming in, please let us know where you're chatting in from. And give us a quick like if you're on YouTube on the way in. That will really help our distribution on YouTube. And thank you, everyone in the chat. I'm looking at all of your comments right now. Thank you, all of our friends. Thank you, Paul, for the super chat already. Thank you very much. All of our friends in the UK, thank you so much for joining us. And from X.com, thank you for my friends on X. I've enjoyed my conversations with you. If I've been talking with you, thank you very much for reaching out to me. So let me just go ahead and open the floor now for Susan and Barbara. What are your opening thoughts for today's show?
Well, my buddy, Mike Benz, who I communicate with every once in a while and that we like each other very much, has an urgent message to the White House this morning about what's going on with Musk in France. And he lays it right on the table in terms of this all being about the midterm elections. In other words, if you think about 2024 and the difference between the censorship, which ended when Musk essentially, pulled the plug on bought X and actually pulled the plug on that entire censorship industrial complex, a big, big deal. If you think about that suddenly coming back into the fore in terms of the midterms and the ability of the president to actually communicate with the population over the enemy media, you understand the stakes which are in this battle. Now, as usual with Mike, he went on for quite a while. I would have said it in one sentence, which is, we need to impose sanctions on France, Britain, and every other damn country which is actually trying to vitiate the idea of free speech and free thought. That is key to how a population actually develops. That's key to how we actually win the midterms. And we can't tolerate this type of BS and the targeting of Elon Musk. He's being targeted for that reason and no other. I mean, I can talk about going to space. I can talk about all the great things he's done in terms of invention, but opening up the political process in the United States, rescuing us from what is the fascist drift of Europe, and it is going fascist. When you start talking about thought crimes, controlling what people can say, putting people in prison for actually criticizing transgender mutilation of young people, you are literally doing exactly what the Nazis did, or what Mussolini did, or what people recognize as fascism. Fascism isn't ICE, all right? Fascism is control of thought and making it a crime to think certain things. It's just fundamental. So I agree with Mike Benz's plea. You can probably find it on X. It's out there, we should sanction these people, really making this the spear point of what's the difference between the United States of America and our exceptional Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and what life is like in an oligarchy, which Europe has become.
Yeah, I mean, I'll follow up on that in terms of what has really precipitated this overreach by the European oligarchs. If we cycle back just a couple of weeks to the Davos smackdown between the Trump administration and the globalists, they were very clear. Globalism has failed and it's over. Now, in the wake of that, President Trump and his team have taken a series of very dramatic actions, which we'll address as we go through the questions and answers. But they do involve things like beginning to reorient the direction of the Federal Reserve under the pending new chairman, assuming he's approved, away from it simply being an instrument of destruction to something which is a little more in the lane of not hurting the United States. Even bigger, of course, are the trade deals which President Trump is making. He just pulled the legs out from under Europe with his trade deal with India, which is a much more favorable deal than what Ursula von der Leyen negotiated just 6 days earlier. And then you have the announcement this week of the, as Adam said, the strategic minerals reserve, what they're calling Project Vault, which gets to the heart of one of the tools of the oligarchy. As we all know, the oligarchy uses money through their central banking system. But one of the other major tools historically has been their control over raw materials. They own the big conglomerates, Rio Tinto Zinc, and so on and so forth. And that has always been a critical choke point of the empire, today the globalists, in terms of being able to strangle and blackmail countries. And what the Trump administration did, and we'll get into some of the details of it a little later, is announce we're breaking the back of that. So what you're actually seeing right now is, for the first time in, I frankly am ready to go back to William McKinley in terms of the historic magnitude of what this administration is doing, challenging the very principles of an imperial system and a global oligarchy. And that is why they are, in a sense, coming out of the closet. They used to call it fascism with a democratic face, or they tried to package it in the rules-based order, or in the green agenda, or all sorts of other, advertising slogans they slapped on top of their imperial policies to basically blow smoke up your behind, to think that you were buying into a policy that was going to help you. That's over. And the majority of people, I think, in the United States, and a growing, which is why Donald Trump won in 2024, and a growing number of people in other countries around the world recognize that it's out in the open This is an imperial, fascist, anti-human system. Donald Trump is finally, by getting back into office in 2024 and using the power of the United States as it's supposed to be used, force them to come out in the open. And that's why I think you're seeing what you're seeing, what Barbara just said. You can give no other name to this except fascism. And it's out in the open. And I think it's going to propel even more people to stand up and fight. Our job, of course, is to make sure people know how to fight effectively. And that is what I hope we'll be discussing over the course of the next almost 2 hours.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. And a big thank you to everyone that's tuning in the chat. We're already getting some good questions. I'm going to take one right here. And thank you, everyone that's tuning on x.com. Please give us a retweet there if you're watching. Thank you so much for the support. Okay, so I have this first comment and question. Thank you, USAF veteran. I'm going to take this one real quick. Just a quick comment. He says, fascism is actually a left-wing ideology. Barbara, Susan, any thoughts on that one?
Well, basically, if you understand the history of fascism in Germany, you recognize that in both Germany and Italy, they started out as what people would normally consider to be left-wing ideologies. That was the fight, and essentially what happened is this kind of, Hitler's fascism actually has, ideological components which would make most people who live in this traditional modern left-wing, right-wing description kind of say, whoa, what was that about? Like, Adolf Hitler was a rabid environmentalist, something that is completely coherent with the same idea, because it's all centered on the idea that human beings are like animals, and you have basically different means of keeping them roaming around in the zoo, which are all fixed, versus what we actually are, which is endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, and endowed by our Creator with a mission to perfect life here on earth in conjunction with his divine, potencies. So that's the difference. We're creative beings in God's creation. We're not animals. And all sorts of different varieties of tenets, beliefs, etc., can be manufactured to actually say, okay, we want to herd the animals in this direction or that direction. But that's why free speech, which I just emphasized, is so very, very important. You need human creativity. You need to think outside the box, as the president keeps saying. Don't get hung up in the present boxes they've constructed for us. Actually come out and figure out a way to solve the problem, which you can't really put labels on very often. So that's how I'd answer the question.
Yeah, and I just add that the antidote to all of the isms, whether it's fascism, communism, or you can come up with your list of isms, is actually the American system. Because the American system is the one conscious economic system, as with monotheistic religions like Christianity, which puts this question of man as a creator at the center of how it is supposed to function. And the fact that we are now magnifying the rediscovery of the American system. I mean, there are other people out there now who are exploring it, discussing it, examining it, different groups over the last several decades. Of course, we've referenced our trade ambassador, Jameson Greer, who gave a brilliant speech at Davos on Hamiltonian economics, the American system. But we discovered it way back in the 1970s and have been propagating it that long. And I think probably understand it better than most, even avowed advocates of it at this point. And that's the reason we're starting to get some pushback, some silly little attacks saying, well, if you're attacking the British, then you must be a Russian agent. And what they're really afraid of is it's not a question of the British in some kind of abstract geopolitical world. We're attacking the British system with the knowledge that the American system is superior. And that's what people are afraid of. Once people are living in this domain of how the American system of physical political economy works, based on human creativity, as Barbara said, then you're not going to fall for any of their isms, and you'll know how to fight them.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. And let me just say, add a few of my own thoughts real quick to extend what Barbara was saying. I think to really understand fascism as like a coherent political strategy that gets like deployed against countries, it's actually a package of ideologies. Fascism is actually deploying both a left-wing and a right-wing ideology at once in a society. I think fascism, in my mind, seeing how modern fascism is looking at the super left-wing ideologies and the super right-wing ideologies. That's something that I've done personally in my life. I've actually seeked out some of the most extreme ideologies on both sides and spent time trying to figure out what they're saying. And what you see when you spend time on both sides of the most extreme political spectrums is that it's basically the same thing. There's different flavors. They spin it in different ways, but it's still the same thing. It's still this crazy extremism kind of philosophy that affects both sides of the political spectrum. So I clearly see how getting people to understand how left-wing fascism is a more challenging thing, but I see fascism as a dual-sided thing. It's a package of extreme ideologies that people use to destabilize a country and ultimately change its government in one way or another. So that's the way I see fascism, especially modern fascism, as we're dealing with it today in the modern world. So thank you very much for your question. Okay, so I'm going to take, so thank you, David Gray, for joining us. I'm going to take the super chat here and the first question, actually the second question from our newsletter supporters. So let's take this both together. So David Gray says, UK, all of the president's actions have been a masterclass. Has the timing of the Epstein files started the fractures that will free 1 billion people? And then I'm going to take a question here also from the UK. Again, thank you everyone from across the pond who listens to us and take in our lessons. We really appreciate your support. So thank you, Lou. I've seen serious analysis that says the game is up for the European Union. You seeing that as a likely outcome. So thank you, David, and thank you, Lou, both from the UK. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts?
Well, let's talk for a minute about what is in the latest Epstein dump about Lord Peter Mandelson. Adam, can you share the screen? This is probably the most, in all the gazillions of pages, this is probably the most important. This is a communication from Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell in June of 2009. So you are in the heat of the financial blowout after 2008. And by the way, Epstein was under house arrest at that time. And he says to her, well, for all intents and purposes, Petey is now Deputy Prime Minister. They're talking about Lord Peter Mandelson, who had a high-ranking position in the Labour government in Britain during that period of time under Gordon Brown. And what this latest dump shows is massive, massive, massive communication between Mandelson and Epstein on all critical decisions that are being made by the British government in relationship to the financial crisis and financial decisions, including bailouts, asset sales, and so on. There's also communication between Epstein, Mandelson, and Jamie Dimon during that same period of time, J.P. Morgan Chase. What does all of this mean? Is this latest Epstein dump is giving you very, very important insight into, I would say, the last important nodal point in the financial architecture of the post-war world, which was the 2008 blowout, which was caused by the insane policies of this global financier elite. It worked its way through the housing market, as people know. But there were two possible responses to that 2008 crisis. One would have been to say, you speculators you central bankers, you global finance, you imperial financiers, you cause this, you're going to eat it. And we're going to reorganize the system in a way which gets back to much more sanity. Well, I think we all know that didn't happen. We were in the middle of the fight on Capitol Hill in 2008, 2009, trying to get a return to Glass-Steagall, trying to bring some sanity back into the system. It didn't happen. And now what this latest dump shows is a window, obviously not the whole picture, but a window into the fact that the British were operating through Mandelson and obviously through his international networks, had a hand in the fight over how the post-2008 period would go. So here we are in 2026, 18 years late. Well, let's fast forward to 2016, 8 years after that crisis. The election of Donald Trump in 2016 was a reaction fundamentally to the insanity of that globalist system, whether it was the bailouts, whether it was the free trade policies, whether, of course, it was the entire cultural insanity. And I'm not going to throw the perpetual wars in because we're talking about the economy, but the American population stood up and said, no, we're going to stop this. And here's somebody who's going to make America great again. Now, did they really know how he was going to do that? No, but they had a pretty good idea of what he was not going to do. And of course, he didn't have much of a chance to do a lot compared to what he wanted to do in his first administration. And now he's back and he's doing it. And again, I think we'll get into more aspects of this. But fundamentally, what you're seeing is a reversal, a complete challenge to all of the decisions that were made in the post-2008 period, which were an acceleration of what had been happening previous to that. So I think the timing of this is not coincidental. And then as to the question of the EU, look, everything, and the fact that Starmer may go, whether it was this or whether it was simply the failure of his policies and the failure of the globalist policies. Let's go back to what Howard Lutnick said at Davos. I'm here to tell you your policies have failed. Everything that you stood for is a complete and abject failure because it has to fail. You look at the trade deals that they're negotiating to supposedly stand up to the United States. They're negotiating their trade deals on the basis of free trade. So the Canadians just negotiated a trade deal with China. What's that going to do? Bring cheap Chinese EVs into Canada and destroy what's left of the Canadian auto industry. The deal that the EU just negotiated with the South American nations in Mercosur is bringing cheap South American foodstuffs, primarily, I think, beef and pork, maybe chicken, I don't know, into Europe, and it's going to wipe out the European farmers. And there are mass protests in Brussels and Paris and elsewhere where they're dumping loads of manure, in front of the government buildings because these policies are a failure. And ultimately, the failure of those policies, I think, will lead to the breakup of the European Union. I'm not going to try and forecast how fast, but it's a failed system. It's like any imperial system. Ultimately, it's going to fail. Now, it could metastasize into something uglier, and it obviously is trying to metastasize into full-blown fascism at this point, or it could just disintegrate and we could go back to a Europe of sovereign nations, which is, I hope, where we're going.
I'd like to give a quick shout out to some super chats here first. Thank you, BSV, for joining us. Thank you for tuning in every week. And everyone who's in the YouTube chat, please just give us a quick like. It helps us reach a wider distribution on YouTube. Thank you very much. Also, Gary Wentz, thank you very much. We enjoy everyone too. We can't do any of this without the support of our viewers. We don't take corporate contributions. We are a reader and a viewer supported organization. So thank you very much. Thank you. Barbara, do you have anything to say on this issue of the EU? I would like to say it looks like the EU is going to be finished relatively soon. I think the bigger question is what takes its place? is it really going to be more fascism, or are they going to get something closer to an American solution?
Well, that's the real question, isn't it? I mean, the present EU comes directly. It's a slave of the City of London, to be blunt, and it comes right out of the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1989, 1990, where Germany, had a chance to actually emerge as a nation state, a united nation state for the first time, in decades and decades and decades. And if you look back at the history of that particular battle, you'll see that essentially the Germans, by asserting that they wanted to be a nation state with all the powers of a nation state and not be part of some grand European scheme, which, actually had been the plan of the oligarchy for decades, dating back to, crazy pan-European movements, which led to the development of fascism as the outcome. So the answer is, will they find the gumption to actually come back to the idea of the nation state? Or will they continue to insist that this blob, which, really exists to suppress people more than anything else, is the way to go? And that's globalism, period. And it has failed. All right. You just look at the Ukraine war. It has failed. Look at, all their attempts to destroy Russia, which insists on being a nation state. For decades, the Russians, the Chinese, and even the United States, in the minds of these idiots, were called revisionists. All right. That's a terrible word in, I guess, bureaucratese. But that was the reason given for why we have to fight China and Russia at every, exhaust all our resources in doing so. The nation state, the idea that you're self-sufficient, that you have a specific culture, that you should basically try and make your culture the very best, as Melania likes to say, be best in the world, and actually be involved in a great competition to see what produces the best for its population. That is the system which we're actually looking at here, and which Trump is trying to reinitiate in this world. And all of the creeps who are saying that the United States is somehow the new imperialists, all right? You see that in all of the rags from the City of London at this point. That's nonsense. Every deal we're making here is a deal. We're going in and we're saying, hey, this is what we want for the United States. What can we give you? We're not going in and simply looting all these countries, which is what imperialism does. We're saying, let's develop together. You have stuff which we want, and we can give you stuff which you need. And that's the American system. That's not imperialism.
Thank you, Barbara. And a quick thank you to Thomas Jansen. Thank you very much for the generous super chat. I was reading the chat. I agree with other people. Can we just trade Minnesota for Alberta? And then we had people jumping in. There's a lot of good people in Minnesota. I'm sure they don't want to be a part of Canada. And that we should always remember that. The news media, right? That's the problem with the news media, is it generally only shows you one side. So you turn on news media, and the first thing you think of when you see all that Minnesota stuff is you think, oh my God, why is everyone in Minnesota so crazy? But it's actually not everyone in Minnesota. So yes, can we just trade Minnesota for Alberta? Yes, I understand where you're coming from. But at the same time, don't forget that there are a majority of good people in the world. And the biggest problem that we face right now is that the news media is primarily negative, and they're just going to keep pushing their agenda and make everything look very lopsided. So thank you very much. Please make sure you get our free newsletter. We do have a daily newsletter. We're going to send you something every day. The link is in the description, or you can just search for Promethean Action. You don't have to pay anything for it. When you sign up, the free options all the way on the left, just get it for free. Let us stay in contact with you. And that's the easiest way for us to be able to stay in contact with you outside of YouTube. So thank you very much, Thomas, for the super chat.
Let me just add one addendum to what you said, Adam. Donald Trump is very, very fond of showing the map of the United States that shows all the counties that voted for him. And I believe it was between 70 and 80% of the counties. Plenty of those counties are in Minnesota. We don't want to abandon those people.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, so I want to give a quick shout out here to Jennifer. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. Now, I think this leads into a bigger question. How do I join again? I just subbed on the website. So thank you very much. Yes, if you just signed up on the website, you're going to get our free newsletter. But we also have a different process, which I think you might be asking about. We have this midterm boot camp with Promethean Pack. And I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but we're going to be talking about our midterm boot camp later in the show, because we do have a plan to bring change to this midterm election now to make sure that we win it. So the way that you get involved with Promethean Action is right now, just get our free newsletter. The link is in the description. And then we're going to talk about something that's beyond our newsletter called the Midterm Boot Camp. We're going to be discussing that a little bit more in the discussion. So thank you very much, Jennifer, for your support. And just let us know if you have any more questions moving forward. Okay, so the next question I'm going to take is another question that's coming up quite a bit in the chat in various ways. It actually has to do with the Board of Peace. So thank you very much, David, for this question. Few people will realize the strategic importance of the Board of Peace. Can Susan or Barbara explain the impact on NATO and how membership and non-membership exposes the two sides? Thank you, David, for your question. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts?
Well, it's starting out in the Middle East, the cauldron of warfare for centuries. And Trump, so far, is doing a pretty damn good job of solving that problem, to everybody's complete, total amazement. Because everything there, if you're a pessimist, God, everything there is really stacked against you. It's a religious war. Religious wars have gone on for centuries, and this one has gone on for centuries. And he's used the keystone concept of development, economic development. How do we turn Gaza, which is flat Earth at this point in terms of destruction? How do we actually rapidly put shovels in the ground, have everybody, Arabs and Israelis together, actually building things, building a new, essential relationship between the Palestinians and the Israelis through joint economic development? And how do we actually develop, in turn, the entire area? Those become the key questions to be solved. NATO, this bankrupt entity, which essentially exists to wage war on Russia and nothing else. I mean, admittedly, they wanted to expand it to actually wage war on China as the next stop in our lifetime journey here. NATO is going to be shown up by the Board of Peace in terms of what Trump actually accomplishes and in terms of what he's trying to accomplish there, which people have to understand. There is so much propaganda out there about all of this. Is this all a big plot by the Jews? Or alternatively, is this all a big plot by the Muslims to brainwash us and essentially take us all over, etc.? Nonsense. What this can actually do is show a new way, which is what Trump is. He's a builder, but he's also creative, outside the box. Let's think outside the box. Where would we like to go? What's our mission? What mission can we actually get people to sign on to? Who hate each other, who've been fighting each other for decades? How do we actually outflank that? Those are the questions which are actually being asked at this point, and the bankrupt, bereft British and NATO nonsense has nothing to do with that reality. So it's a critical initiative, and in one of the toughest neighborhoods in the whole wide world. Are we going to have a war with Iran right now or something like that? basically, Iran remains a destabilizing force in the area to be utilized by the oligarchy, which is what has put those mullahs into place, pure and simple. So I don't think Trump is wanting to go there. I think he's trying once again to negotiate a deal to actually get the Iranians to recognize where they're at in terms of the strategic reality of the Middle East and get on board with the Abraham Accords. And, we'll see how that all develops. But, Iran having a nuclear weapon at this point is obviously a non-starter. Just from the present strategic reality. That's where people get tripped up. They often think in terms of these grand platitudes, like, should all nations have the right to nuclear weapons? Well, that's kind of an interesting theory out there for your college thesis, but it has little to do with how people actually view that in the nations involved right now, and it's totally destabilizing from that standpoint. So, yeah, it's a new world, and it's terrific, and people need to understand it.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think the Board of Peace exemplifies how Trump does things, because a lot of people get very impatient. They want us to get out of NATO. They want us to get out of the United Nations. They want us to shut down the Federal Reserve. They want all sorts of things instantaneously. The world would be better if none of those institutions had existed. It's true. But what Trump is doing with this, as I think he's also doing, in other domains, is rather than just trying to, quote, shut something down, which frankly, I don't think is politically possible anyway at this point. I mean, get out of NATO with this Senate, they'd have to repeal the NATO treaty. That's not going to happen. Which gets us to the midterm elections again a little bit later. But what Trump does is he begins to build up parallel institutions. Okay, NATO and the UN are non-functional at best, or a problem, or an enemy operation. I'm going to set up something new, and I'm going to show people this is a much better way to go. So these institutions, I think, are going to atrophy. The UN is out of money. The Secretary General of the UN is basically begging for money. I joked the other day that he's going to have to send up a GoFundMe account, to keep the UN going. Well, why is that happening? Because, admittedly, we're not paying what we used to pay. And with NATO, we've said to the Europeans, carry your own weight. But the most important thing he's doing is saying, I don't need you, because I'm actually going to work on peace over here. I'm going to work on economic development over here. Who's with me? That's how he operates.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. And thank you very much, Shelley Sexton. You sent in the super chat right in the middle of us answering this exact question. You may be watching a little bit earlier in the show. So thank you very much for the super chat. And you'll see the section where I answered this question. So thank you very much for the super chat. Please make sure you're liked and subscribed on our channel, and you'll get the notification when we go next here on YouTube. Let me just go through a quick super chat. So I have software here that captures all the super chats. I know some people have asked questions. I'm going to get to those questions in just a few more minutes. Let me just go through my thank yous first. Jeff in Utah, thank you for joining us every week. We appreciate your support, and we hope you're going to bring some people to the polls this November. That's the thing. All the people that are supporting us, we hope you're going to try and work to bring just one or two people to vote with you in the midterm elections. That's going to be absolutely crucial for our ability to win. Thank you, Saxon Pirates. Please make sure you're liked to our channel. And I want to just take this question really quickly here, because we were literally just discussing this before the show started. Just a quick answer from Barbara or Susan. What are your thoughts on Steve Bannon? Can we still trust him?
Trust but verify. No, I look, Bannon is a patriot. There's no question about that. All right. But I happen to think he's totally wrong in his current approaches towards President Trump. The midterms are going to be one. His theory of the case is the midterms are all about the base, however you describe that in terms of the Trump movement. And what we really have to be doing is throwing constant red meat to the base. So that means even if the public is horrified by what's going on in Minnesota and is undermining the enforcement of what we're trying to do here, which is to deport 15 million people, a pretty big task, which is what the voters asked Trump to do. Even if the tactics on the ground are undermining that, we should just keep it up because you can't give in to the terrorists. All right. Here's the real story. The midterms are going to be won by the coalition, which actually won in 2024, where we brought everybody into MAGA. Trade unionists, former Democrats, the independent voters, all of those people have to be reached. And what Steve Bannon and others are not talking about at this point is Donald Trump's American system economic revolution. All right, that's what the public has to understand, not, basically beggar thy neighbor in terms of the ins and outs of immigration policy. Yeah, the voters said, get rid of 15 million people who we don't even know who they are. All right, what Trump is saying is, okay, having people killed on national TV is not really, a great way to go about accomplishing that. And it's very clear that the rioters want more people killed. They want people suicided. They want this particular kind of chaos. So Trump is flanking it. He's coming out and saying, here's the real story. The reason why you're seeing all this crap against ICE right here is because this is how the Democratic Party has funded itself in Minnesota for the last, decades, in the case of Minnesota, through actually ripping off the government, through having immigrant fraud on major government programs, by pocketing the cash themselves. It's a massive fraud scandal. So I'm gonna continue the enforcement. We got agreements, which was a cave, to actually take out the criminals in the jails for the first time. But we're not going to have head-to-head confrontations between a bunch of anarchists and, essentially the federal government, which plays the enemy's game. We're going to flank it. And we're going to continue to enforce these things. And the cities, which actually are so-called sanctuary cities, can continue to drown in their own damn policies, because the president can't do it by himself. In those cities, the population has to rise up and say, enough. We want the federal government to come here because we don't want to step over addicts, and we don't want to step over, we don't want terrorists, and we don't want hidden rapists, and we don't want all this other stuff essentially driving us crazy where we can't walk to work. So, that's what I think Bannon is just wrong. It's not feeding red meat to what he conceives of as the base. It is actually going out and recruiting tons more people into MAGA who don't fit the ideological purity test necessarily. And it means recruiting them on the basis of Trump's economic policies, which you never really hear him talk about. He's having Scott Besson on recently, which is great, but you don't really hear him talk about the American system or what Trump is actually doing to really evolve the world. You constantly hear from a lot of these social media influencers just this constant carping of this or that social wedge issue, where if you actually prosper as an economy, you overcome most, if not all, of those social issues. So that's how I'd answer the question. I'm not prepared to condemn him to hell at this point. I just think he's dead wrong.
Let me add, because I saw in the chat, somebody said, I trust no one. And that's actually not a bad place to start, except maybe your relationship to God, right? I don't want you to trust me. What I want is for you to understand what my thought process is, what are the underlying hypotheses and assumptions that I'm coming from. And as I think you all have figured out from Promethean Action, in its broadest stroke, it's the American system versus the British system. can you verify for yourself that that is actually the way the world works? And then you take what I and Barbara and others say from the standpoint of seeing that this is a coherent way of looking at the world, which seems to be verified in actual practice. And then you make your decisions from there. But this idea that I have my favorite influencer and everything that comes out of his mouth, I'm going to quote, trust, you might want to rethink that. And especially if everything that comes out, that 80% of what comes out of their mouth just makes you angry, then you really might want to do a mental check in terms of, as Barbara said, where they're coming from and what might be wrong with their underlying hypothesis.
Thank you, Barbara and Susan. Okay, we have an incredible amount of super chats. Can I ask you, ladies, I'm going to take some questions. Can we do a rapid fire question and answer where you try to limit your answer to less than a minute? Can we take a few of those? Because you've really, and all these are on topic, so they're all good questions. It's just we're getting some big super chats and some big questions, and I want to try and address more stuff in these shows. So I'm going to take a few of them here. Let's see if we can keep them as quick as possible. Yes. All right. So the first one here. So thank you, Fender Man. Thank you for waiting. We are going to take them. What do you make of Todd Blanche removing Ed Martin from the working group on weaponization of the government task force? I don't know anything about this one.
I think that's an internal personnel matter. I don't think it's been like accurately characterized in the media or on social media. I look at results. And, basically, I think Ed Martin's a terrific guy. But, from the standpoint of actually dealing with the complexity of running a Department of Justice where half of the people are on the other side and actually getting results in the federal court system where most of the judiciary is on the other side, you've got to have actual very aggressive, deep-rooted lawyers doing that. And it strikes me that basically, we're not getting results. I thought it's nice to parade Tish James about mortgage fraud before the public, but quite frankly, in terms of my thinking on it, it's not the biggest case, and it's not the best case to think through strategically. And a lot of this stuff, quite frankly, from the Justice Department has been what you can call performative. It hasn't been serious in terms of saying, okay, this is a very complicated problem. And what's happening right now with the Fort Pierce grand jury, I think is going to be much more substantive, with Tulsi basically leading the intelligence and having blown apart everything that's going on there. And I expect massive repercussions coming out of the filing of that case. Like, I expect parallel actions to be going on in terms of a lot of people in the chat are asking about Soros. I think that, the goods are there where we're going, where the tax exempt status of all of these big foundations can go out the window. All right. And that's the type of thing you look for and actually think about of things that actually succeed. We don't want to just perp walk a whole bunch of people and then essentially have the prosecutions fail. It's nice. All right. But you don't really gain a lot of credibility with the population in doing that. And so, I don't know exactly what's happening with that. There's all sorts of side theories about what's going on, and Todd Blanche is terrible because he's a lawyer, and this, that, and the other. I don't buy it. I just think we have to watch it and see how it develops. And as I said, this is a pretty complicated question. And the Justice Department has been a rotten apple in the federal government. I can personally testify for about 40 years or more. So that's what I think is going on. I went on too long. I know
why. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, next question. Excuse me. Whoops. So thank you very much, Fender. Thank you very much, Fender. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel and get our free newsletter. Okay, here's one that we can take quickly. Would you agree that Trump is like Teddy Roosevelt, only Teddy was better at diplomacy? Thank you and God bless. So thank you, Romeo, for your honest question. Thank you for joining us. Barbara and Susan, just your quick thoughts on this one.
I'll do 30 seconds and Barbara can do 30. No, he's not like Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was a British agent. And that's all I'll have to say about it.
And, basically, I think Trump is very conscious of what kind of diplomacy he's actually doing. And, he's causing you to have real connection fits because he's causing you to think differently and change some of your fundamental theories and axioms, which is why people get so enraged at him. That, in some sense, is the root of Trump derangement syndrome.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And thank you very much, Romeo. Please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Okay, the new life. Here's one. Should President Trump call the rhinos on the carpet to get the SAVE Act passed? Rhinos are worse than Dems. So first off, I think he already is trying to force the rhinos to do it, and I absolutely agree. Rhinos are worse than Dems. It's actually the rhinos that are our biggest problems, not so much Democrats. We have plenty more questions on this, but maybe you could say just a few words before we speak more on this issue of the midterms and the rhinos.
Well, there isn't much more to say about it than the midterms, okay? In other words, the rhinos are the rhinos. I don't like all the black pilling which is going on around these battles in the Congress right now by various social media influencers who expect Trump to create real miracles with the Congress that he has. This is a bad Senate, really bad Senate. Most of them are compromised and on the other side. The question is, how do we answer that in terms of the midterms? And I think we can talk a lot more about that as the show goes on.
But I would just say the answer is yes. He's got to just keep beating them about the head and shoulders until we get this passed.
Thank you, New Life. We have a free newsletter. Make sure you check out our newsletter. Okay, and I'm going to take two more quick ones here for now. First one, how do we separate our currency from the world? The dollar is so tied up in world currencies that I'm not sure the dollar will survive. Well, I will say this, Jennifer, before I open this to Barbara and Susan. The dollar will absolutely survive as long as we keep this MAGA Trump process moving forward. As long as we continue on this process that Trump has initiated, beginning to reverse the last 40 to 50 years of deindustrialization, as long as we're on the track to bring our most productive industries back to the United States, I'm sure the dollar will survive. So Barbara and Susan, your quick thoughts on this one.
Well, I think you said it. I mean, the question of the dollar is never something abstract. Our relationship in the world is not something technical. If we continue to reorient a world to a world of sovereign nation based on productive activity, we're going to sort through and untangle all the garbage relationships of the past, 20, 30 years. And I think we have a Treasury Secretary who knows how to do it.
And thank you, J.L. Gray. I'll just say we're working on this. If I were to share one of your videos to be your introduction, which do you think it would be? I would also like to suggest you put together a video that is a compilation of your most important content. Yes, we're working on the content creation issue. It's basically just me working on these videos. I need to get more of our organization making it. But if you're good at content creation, can you reach out to me? I'm trying to build a network of people that will clip these videos and spread them out to social media more. Yeah, you can find me on my x.com. My x.com is at AdamSturman23. It's right here under my name. If you could just reach out to me on x.com, and if you can help us with the video creation stuff, we can talk some more. I'd be more than happy to help you make videos and get our message out to the world. So thank you very much for your generous super chat. We really appreciate it. Again, we have a free newsletter. Like this channel, and you'll get our next political update, which will be on Saturday. Okay, so we're going to take the next question for 4 questions in. But this is from Pauline. She is a very long-term supporter of Promethean Action. Thank you, Pauline, for this question. So she asked a simple question. Please explain Trump's strategy in taking oil commerce with India away from Russia. So thank you, Pauline, for this question. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this international deal? Because Trump is definitely trying to, he just made a huge, big free trade deal. Part of it is a free trade component, but he just made a huge trade deal with India.
Well, it's pretty simple. All deals involve carrots and sticks. And basically what he's trying to do is end this war. And he's very impatient with the Russians in terms of the fact of the war continues. He's, I think, much more impatient with the Ukrainians. But obviously the ability of Russia to finance the war is tied to the oil trade. So he's pursuing, sticks in terms of hoping to use that as a methodology to get Russia to end the war. I'm not sure that's particularly effective in terms of Russia, but that's what he's doing.
And I'll just add in terms of the rest of the deal. I mean, he negotiated $500 billion of purchases of manufactured goods, agricultural goods, and other things, from energy and other things from the United States from India. That's a $500 billion, that he's negotiated. And if you compare that to the poor Europeans, they just signed what they call the mother of all deals, which has no specific purchase components, and basically just says, let's extend more free trade forever, and somehow that's going to end up benefiting us. So, his trade deal is very much in keeping with the American system outlook. And as Barbara said, this one particular aspect of it has to do with, his perception, perhaps, that this could nudge the Russians a little further. I will add one other very interesting aspect to it. He also said that India will not only be buying American oil, but he hopes it will be buying Venezuelan oil. So for all those people who say regime change, he didn't regime change in Venezuela. He got rid of a problem, and he's working with the legitimate government which followed Maduro. And frankly, as far as I can see, moving in all sorts of aggressive ways that are actually going to help the Venezuelan people.
Thank you very much, Barbara and Susan. Again, let's go through some more super chats. Thank you, everyone, for sending in these super chats. We appreciate your support. You're really allowing us to do what we do on these shows, especially. So thank you, friend from France. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel. You'll get our next political briefing on Saturday. Thank you, Chase Gray Feather. If Alberta joined the United States, the map will look like a fist giving the middle finger to the world. Love y'all. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chase, for the support. Please get our free newsletter. Lancastrian, thank you for joining us again this week. We appreciate the super chat. Elizabeth Judy, I need a deeper understanding. I don't have time to read all your past blog posts due to caring for elderly parents. Can you point me in the right direction? Thank you for your time. Yes, so I can point you in the right direction very, very quickly. If you do a search for 3 words, Promethean Action Toolkit, if you do a search for those 3 words, and we have so many people searching on this on the search engines, it'll be the first thing that pops up. We have good SEO on this. Promethean Action Toolkit. If you search for those 3 words, you will find a list of our resources and books that our authors have written. So I would say just search for Promethean Action Toolkit. We're going to be talking more about this in the stream. And I'd like to give a quick shout out to William Chisholm. Thank you, William. Strong work from grounded individuals. No blue hair.
Yep, this is my own.
No blue hair. No blue hair. Thank you very much, William, for the support. We have free newsletter. Please make sure you get our free newsletter. So thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next question here we have from our newsletter. So these questions here that I'm pulling up on the slides, these come from our newsletter supporters. I'm going to put in the weekly newsletter throughout the week, I put links to submit questions. So that's where these questions are coming from. It's coming from our newsletter readers. So I'm going to read these next 2 together. It's on Minnesota and what's going on in Minnesota. First from David. I'm 65. I've been an independent voter my whole life. I voted for Trump all 3 times and the protests in my home state, Minnesota, are growing in size, to me, that is not a good thing from a visual perspective. It gives them more power. It continues to grow in size. What's the president's plan to stop the flow of money? Thank you, David, for your question. And the second one is from Laurie. And this question we get all the time. Do you see President Trump invoking the Insurrection Act to end the madness in Minnesota? Now, I believe some of these questions were coming from last week. I think we've had some developments since that time where some of this questions is already answered. But this whole issue of how Trump is handling the deportations and what's going on in terms of the left wing setting up all this trouble for ICE in other states. Should President Trump be invoking the Insurrection Act in Minnesota and in other states? And what is he doing, as David said, to cut off the flow of money to all this?
Well, he's doing a couple of things. First and foremost, he has basically taken the inflammatory aspects of having 3,000 ICE agents on the streets already in Minnesota in a drawdown, which was negotiated because Fry and Waltz agreed to allow ICE to take people who have detainers out of the jails for the first time. That is a flinch by the whole state in terms of that. Most importantly, he has actually appointed a new Assistant Attorney General in the Department of Justice to report to him specifically, not to an entire bureaucracy, about what's going on with prosecuting the fraud, the Somali and other fraud in Minnesota, to actually begin to take down this Democratic funding operation, which exists in tons of other states. It's essentially robbing the federal government at the same time as it's destroying those states for the average citizen. Like in New York City, for example, there's a multiple billion-dollar hole in New York City's budget because of the sanctuary city policy and the way they've actually supported this massive wave of uncontrolled immigration. So what he's doing right now is building the case, which has to happen before you even think about invoking the Insurrection Act. He's on the offensive at this point, although people are trying to call it a climb down. No, it was a retreat in a certain sense, and he called it that, from a policy which wasn't working. And he likes to do that. He will do that. And there's nothing wrong with anything he's doing at this point. It's very clear that in terms of how people are perceiving this across the entire country, that they want the immigration enforcement to continue, that they want all of these people out of here, that they want the policy where the criminals and the terrorists go first. But they don't want to see essentially riots in the streets and people getting killed to enforce the policy. And that's really not necessary. Tom Homan removed all of these people under Obama. All right. Obama is called the deporter in chief, and he actually accomplished that not with any of the fanfare which has accompanied this particular deployment in Minneapolis and elsewhere. I really think that he knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for years. He's got the right priorities. And if Minnesota comes out or other blue state governors come out and oppose this policy, removing the criminals and the terrorists first, then you're going to be more than justified in the population's mind in invoking the Insurrection Act if you have to invoke it. So I think that's the answer to those questions in kind of short form.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, so the next question's here. Let me pull it up. Let's take number 19 next. All right. So this next question is from Mark. And this is especially important for all of our Texas viewers out there, which I know there are quite a few in the chat. Can you better explain the alarming results from the recent special elections? Overall, the GOP has lost 8 races. The most recent is Texas District 9 is even more alarming. In voting prior to the special election, 2 Republicans got 52% of the vote. Wambus Gnas 36 compared to 47 for the Democratic candidate. When Wams Gnas and Remit go head to head this weekend, Remit gets 57 and Wams Gnas gets 43. Wams Gnas only picked up half the votes the other Republican got in the first vote, meaning Republicans did switch and voted Democrat, and Remit got more votes to come out in the end. We can say the elections are rigged and they may be, and GOP doesn't show up in the midterms and special elections. I feel like we are making excuses for our lack of Republican direction and leadership outside of President Trump. All of our candidates are not connecting with the voters. They seem to be missing the key points voters are concerned with in each election. At this rate, come November, the government will be stalled and Trump will face nothing but impeachment charges. The revolution will be over. Sorry to be so negative, but we need to wake up. Thank you, Mark, for this question. Barbara and Susan.
Yeah, I'll start because I took a look at this, and you know, you're not being negative. We do need to wake up. All right, that's the point of this entire thing. What you saw there is a prelude to the midterms, unless the Republican Party wakes up and does what it isn't doing, which is campaigning on the president's economic policies. That's what voters are concerned about. You know, most people have lived through economic hell in the last 10, 15 years. Trump is doing all sorts of things to actually ameliorate that. He's building a brand new industrial-based economy. But if you ask the average voter if they even know what that's about, they won't be able to tell you. They have no clue, because the Republican Party is all doing the Bush Republican game of social wedge issues, i.e., you know, focused on the Second Amendment right to carry arms, focused on the trans issue, focused on, guys in women's sports, focused on all that stuff. What this guy Renner did, he's a machinist, he's a unionist, and he really, really, really wants, as a central campaign issue, raising the productivity and the wages of his fellow workers. That happens to be at the center of President Trump's policy, but you'd never know it from the Republican Party of Texas. We're on the ground there in Texas. Our people tell us that the Republican Party, if you go to their meetings, refuses to even discuss Donald Trump. They're scared of it. They think he alienates voters, as if November of 2024 never happened, okay? And they think that the way you actually campaign is on these wedge issues, which, frankly, the voters out there have wised up. They know that these things culturally are very important. Yes, they are flashpoints in our society, and we've got to actually recreate our culture along with our economy. But these guys, as the president said, why aren't you campaigning on my policies? Why aren't you actually saying what we're doing? Why aren't you explaining that? Some of it may very well be that they're so stupid that they can't explain it. But, I'm not going to go there at this point. I'm just going to say, like our questioner said, it is time to wake up. We are dedicated here to this as our fundamental task over the coming period. We're going to do everything we can. We're only limited by how much money and staffing we have to do it. But we're doing everything we can to actually go out and forcefully sell these economic policies, which are the key to everything. The president fundamentally believes a rising tide lifts all boats and will end our division. That's true. And we need to really get behind that if we're going to win the midterms. And it's a way of actually testing anybody who's running for office. Do you know, can you tell me in 100 words or less what the president's economic policies are? You're going to be really scared by what you find among the candidates in terms of the answer to that. They don't know because they're not really on board with Donald Trump, and they're not really on board with MAGA.
Yeah, I think some people on this call know I ran for one of the 6 vice chair positions in Michigan and won as coalition's vice chair last year. And my main theme, which resonated strongly among the delegates, is Donald Trump is not going to be on the top of the ticket in the midterms. We better put his policies on the top of the ticket in the midterms. If you look at the votes in a swing state here like Michigan, Donald Trump pulled more votes, in almost every one of these areas than the other candidates. Some of those candidates were campaigning more or less on Trump's policy, but it was Donald Trump that people were voting for. The Senate candidate in 2024 got 70,000 fewer votes than Trump. That's why he lost. So this idea that Trump is too radioactive, and there's a former rhino chairman of the Republican Party here from way back, I didn't even know who he was, who just had an op-ed in the local paper saying Republicans can sweep 2026 as long as you distance yourself from Donald Trump. No, exactly the opposite. Now, what directly are we doing about this? Adam, why don't you just pull up the Promethean PAC website? Because I'm going to take off my Promethean Action hat and steal Barbara's Promethean PAC hat right now. Again, to make clear, we have our policy arm, which is Promethean Action, and we have our political arm, which is going to become much more important in the course of these midterm elections. And what Promethean PAC is doing is it is conducting if you see right at the very top, first midterm boot camp. Watch the video, learn more. And what that is right there, that is that picture there. The MAGA midterm is our first midterm boot camp. You can watch it now. This is very relevant to the questioner. The 2 candidates that we show there, go back to the midterm boot camp so they can see the picture, Adam. Those 2 candidates that you see there with me on that Caterpillar tractor are actually Texas candidates. And unlike the losers that we've been talking about, they are taking Trump's message directly to their constituents. They are going into a relatively low-income areas in Houston and making clear to people that Donald Trump's policies are opening the door to a better standard of living for you. And what they're focusing on is the promise of skilled trades apprenticeships and vocational education. And there's programs in Houston where poor kids with no money can go to one of these schools for free, come out with an actual skill, and start working at $60,000 a year. So we're conducting every 2 weeks a live discussion with activists around the country to discuss precisely how do you translate Donald Trump's policies into this. Shortly on the boot camp page, you'll have available the slideshow that was used in the second boot camp, and the second boot camp video will be up relatively quickly. But we are committed to doing, frankly, what I think the National Republican Party is not going to do, whether it's structural, political, or they just don't get it, and it's all of the above, if you ask me. They're going to run your typical Republican campaigns. They'll do some on the ground, stuff in terms of get out the vote and phone banking and this, that, and the other thing, all necessary, but will fall absolutely far short unless it's driven by this recognition that Donald Trump is carrying out an economic revolution. This is the basis for a new Republican Party, or as Trump called it, just recently, he talked about the Republican New Deal. And we're committed to providing people with the resources that they need to do this. Now, currently on that Promethean PAC website, you see down there, we do have this half-page flyer, which is on Trump's new Republican Party, but you're welcome to get it, but hold your horses, because we're about to come out, we hope very shortly, with a new half-page flyer, which is going to give you the current state of the economic revolution which Trump is actually carrying out. You know, showing people the factories that are opening, the industries that are being brought back to the United States, how Trump is taking on the cartels like the health insurance companies and the housing industry and so on, to bring down costs for you. So the second flyer is going to give people more of the nitty gritty. This is what this administration is doing to make your economic life better. And so people in the United States, because I know we have a lot of international people on this call, people in the United States who want to be active and effective in the midterms, go to Promethean PAC, avail yourself of the resources, join the fight, make a contribution, order the flyers, all of the above, because it is the case. And I'll just endorse what Barbara said about Mark. It is time to move, and move hard, and move fast, because these midterms are literally tomorrow in real political time.
Okay, I can say a few things about Promethean PAC because I think this is important. We actually have we have two organizations. We have Promethean Action and Promethean PAC. I think it's important to go over the two because it gives you a sense of what we're trying to do. Promethean Action allows us to catch a very wide net. We can take support from international contributors. We can speak and we're much more freer to act with Promethean Action. Promethean PAC falls under something a little bit different. Promethean PAC is regulated by the FEC, and that means that allows us to do certain things like expend money for or against a political campaign. That means we can directly participate in things like get out the vote campaigns for particular candidates. The Political Action Committee allows us to do things that the Political Action Committee, the PAC, allows us to do things that Promethean Action can't do. So that's why we have two organizations, and I have a plan. We're not saying too much about it yet, but I have a big plan for Promethean Action to help bring it into a modern political campaign winning operation, which is something that the Republican. Yeah, excuse me. I know, I have plans to turn Promethean PAC into an actual political winning operation. So you're going to be hearing more from Promethean PAC very soon. If you're already getting our notifications when we do the midterms, you'll be hearing more from Promethean PAC about this. But also we'll be sending emails to Promethean Action. So you'll all be hearing more about this very soon. So that's why we have both Promethean Action or Promethean PAC. Barbara, anything you want to say about Promethean PAC? Because technically you are the treasurer for Promethean PAC.
Well, it's not technical. It's quite a job. You know, the point that this is going to become increasingly important. Ideally, where we would like to be in terms of the midterms is in a situation in which we are dictating the terms of the debate for the entire midterms by our focus on what's really important. You know, Newt Gingrich had this crazy thing called the contract with America. All right. I don't think that's really what we want, but we do need an actual scorecard for people to use in terms of candidacies. And, you know, as opposed to how most people think about it, well, you know, you've got the situation where you've got rotten Senate and a rotten House at this point. Do I have to hold my nose and essentially vote for these guys? And that's the way it's going to go. No, you have an enormous power here. You have the power to change these guys. You have the power by the people being coherent in their approach to these elections in terms of what's important to actually dictate to the candidates whether they're going to get elected or not. And that's what we want to harness in terms of the PAC. If you think about what happened in November of 2024 with the overwhelming mandate which was given to Donald Trump, that allowed him, that silenced all the jerks and compromised people in the House and the Senate for months. That allowed him to come out of the box running and doing things. All right. That actually worked, if you think about it, because the people spoke in such overwhelming terms about what was important to them. Now, we can do the background actions, which is going to take in a longer term to actually get rid of the worst people in the Senate and the House. But right now, Trump is looking at, I'm going to endorse candidates who have the ability to win here, because that's what I got to do in terms of the pragmatics of this particular situation. So then the question becomes, okay, what do we, the people, have to do with that? We need to create an overwhelming mandate where people know, one, you're in office, bud, because of Donald Trump, not because of you. All right? Think about that. You're in office because of Donald Trump, not you. And to the extent that you actually enact Donald Trump's program, you'll get reelected or not. All right. But, that's the kind of approach we have to take. We have to take the lesson from November of 2024, the mandate you all delivered out there by bringing all sorts of people into this massive coalition for these economic policies, which it was fundamentally. And that's what Promethean PAC's big job is going to be going into the midterms.
I saw a couple people in the chat saying, what's the date on the new flyer? It's being formatted right now, and I hope to send it to the printer tomorrow. And I hope it will be in Promethean PAC's hands by the end of the week, and we'll start advertising how you can get it by the end of next week.
Yeah, and don't worry, everyone on the Promethean Action email list will send out an email to everyone on Promethean Action too. So everyone in our network, whether it's Promethean Action or Promethean PAC, you're going to know when we release the new things. So just hold on for a little bit. So let's do a quick thing here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in the chat and for all the super chats. I'm going to run through a bunch of the super chats again. Thank you so much. If you're just tuning in for the first time, this is a live show we do every Thursday. It's question and answer style. We take questions from our email newsletter subscribers, and we also take questions from our super chats and the chat. We do 3 political updates a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, plus this live show on Thursday. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Hopefully YouTube sends you the notifications, and we have a free newsletter. It's completely free. The link is in the description. Let us stay in contact with you outside of Google and YouTube's control. So please get our free newsletter. That's the easiest way to stay in contact with what we're doing as an organization. Okay, Barbara and Susan, again, let's do a quick rapid fire. Let's take a few of these super chats. People are just showing us so much love. I think it's good to just go through them real quick. So thank you, Jennifer, for sending in all of your questions. None of the NSM is talking about riots and uprisings in Iran. Can we talk about that? Yes, we're going to talk about, let me just bring up this other one here that's on a similar thing. So thank you, Jennifer, for your question. And David Gray, again, thank you so much for supporting us. I love it how you guys don't pull any punches. Listening to you brings hope to so many of us. I think the president has got a lot of data by panicking Iran. So briefly, your thoughts on this Iran situation that's going on. We can take some more deeper questions, but I want to get through these super chats real quick.
Yeah, I think people have to step back and recognize that the Iranian Revolution was a British operation. All right, it was a British intelligence operation in the first instance, and has been a destabilizing force throughout the Middle East ever since 1979, when this all occurred. And as I said, I think in response to the previous question about Iran, yes, there are huge demonstrations going on by the population who are sick of being controlled by the mullahs and all of the insanity which is represented by that particular revolution. That said, and it's easy also to get very involved with disgust at certain things which Israel has done over the course of the last decades of eternal religious war in the Middle East. But you got to recognize where all of this is coming from. It has been a British imperial operation to keep all of these countries fighting one another, so that you actually get access to the oil and other riches in the region for British Petroleum and other such companies, which has been what this has been all about all along. So, I think, you're in a different strategic context at this point, where it may truly be that the Iranian people actually come up with their own, regime change. And that is the path you want to have taken. You do not want to do regime change in a nation of that size or that cultural complexity. It's simply, aside from it being disgusting, it just won't work. It'll set off a whole kind of destabilization of what the president has achieved in the Middle East. That's why Saudi Arabia and other Arab nations have been saying, step back. Let's figure out a way to actually get a negotiation going on the nuclear issue and on the missile issue. And that's where we're at.
Thank you, Barbara. Okay, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Napia. Thank you very much for joining us. I don't think I remember seeing you in the chat before. Please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Consider getting our free newsletter. So thank you very much. Texas Real, love you all. Susan, your work in Overtime with the Boys has really caught on. A lot of people are talking about you going on with Tom and with Alex, two of my personal favorites. So thank you, Texas Real, for joining us for today's show. Get our free newsletter. Stay subscribed to the channel. We're going to be doing a lot more. Thank you.
I do want to just give out a shout out to what they're referring to, and let people know that there's a channel called Rich Does Politics, a fellow named Crypto Rich, who has us on a lot and has on a lot of really good people. And sometimes he puts not so really good people on so people can tell the difference. But I want to give a shout out to Rich Does Politics because he does good work.
Yes, definitely check out his channel. It's Rich Does Politics. So make sure you check out Rich's channel. And thank you, Texas. Arizona report, maybe North Korea will buy the UN out of bankruptcy. Thank you for the chuckle, brother. Again, stay subscribed to our channel. We're 100% reader and viewer supported. So thank you very much. Niobium Time, thank you for joining us. All the ism government relies on human honesty. Cream rises to the top, but oil cream rises to the top, but oil rises above the cream. We just need to separate the cream from the oil. I agree. The thing with natural processes is that they normally take what's called a least action pathway. That's why they have the separation layers. But human beings don't have that. Human beings have this extra thing that we have to contend with called free will. And part of free will is tied up with the idea of leadership. So the way that human beings, the way the cream rises to the top with human beings is that there has to be a principle of leadership. It doesn't happen naturally like oil and cream does. You have to apply the principle of leadership. So I agree, we need more people to take up the challenge of political leadership. And that's the thing of making the oil rise above the cream. Barbara or Susan, any comments on this one?
Got to keep cooking.
I agree. Yes, we do have to keep cooking. Thank you very much. And JC Allen, I'd like to thank you very much for your very generous super chat. Really, we are a reader and viewer supported operation, and we support both on the donations and also your political action. Thank you for working with us to try and change the country and the world. We couldn't affect any of this change unless we bring you guys along with us. So thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Again, I have more stuff. Thank you, Marjorie Kelly. Thank you for the support. Gaming Shorts Channel. Thank you, Gaming Shorts Channel, so much for your support. I'm glad you're probably learning something. Please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. And I'm going to take two more, many more. Thank you again, Jennifer. Kevin Hurley, thank you very much. And Jacob Brinkley. Is Judy Shelton still in play? Barbara, any thoughts on that one before we continue our questions here?
Don't know. I think, potentially in terms of the other chairs on the Fed, it could come up. But, this is the problem with the Senate. And, she's got a perspective which is out there in the open. Trump nominated her before and couldn't get her through the rotten Senate. So do I think she's still in play? She met with Besant the other day, and I think that it's very probable that she has some views which are actually being incorporated, and probably in terms of other vacancies at the Fed, she's being considered. But again, the big problem is going to be the United States Senate.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. What we see right now. Okay.
Adam, there were a couple of questions that came in about Kevin Warsh, which might be appropriate at this point.
Here we go. So the Kevin Warsh questions. Thank you, Susan. I had them queued up. Yes. How does the big bank commodities market crush and the selection of Kevin Warsh fit into the Trump strategy opposing the City of London's fiscal and economic stranglehold on the Fed and U.S. Treasury? The big banks are buying cheap and hoarding and offshoring physical precious metals while they decimate the paper derivatives market. All this happened last Friday, and all the exchanges had a glitch to hide the transfers. Richard, thank you very much. I'm going to take this next question also on Warsh. With Trump nominating Kevin Warsh as the new Federal Reserve chairman, how does this work now? Most of us know how the Federal Reserve was created and when. It is neither federal nor a reserve. It is a privately owned central bank in control of monetary policy for the U.S. The Fed chairman is beholden to his master, which are those stakeholders in the Federal Reserve. I am struggling to accept that they will allow Kevin to change the Fed's course now. Can you elaborate how this is all going to work now? Thank you very much, James, for your question. And I have one more here from Roberta. I'm going to take it quickly here. I am concerned about Kevin Warsh, the new Fed chair. Got this on my Telegram, and I'm just going to read this quickly. Kevin is a member connected to the World Jewish Congress, the Bilderberg Group Steering Committee, Rockefeller Foundation, father-in-law billionaire Robert Lauder, heir of Estee Lauder, the Mega Group through father-in-law. The last one is particularly bad. The Mega Group is a group of Jewish billionaires. Okay. Kevin is also big on Bitcoin, which signals that the US dollar or fiat will be crashing. We could be looking at a financial catastrophe that makes 2000 look like child's play. Okay. We are cooked. We are charboiled. He is the very deepest of the deep state. Okay. This is exactly what is said about every single Trump nominee. This is like the same thing that's said about JD Vance. It's just crazy. So anyway, we have to take this because these are the kinds of questions that we get. What does the bringing of Kevin Warsh into the Treasury signify for MAGA and Trump's American industrial revitalization?
Well, I want to first just second what Adam said at the outset. If you took the methodology from that last question, Donald Trump would not have a cabinet, right? I mean, Scott Bessent worked for George Soros. J.D. Vance opposed Donald Trump, and so on. What people are missing, when they do this, is that Donald Trump is a world historical individual who is carrying out what I call Trumpification. By demonstrating that you actually can stand up to this imperial elite with an alternate policy. It's like a lot of people are walking out of their jail cells and saying, oh, okay, I'm with that. Not what I thought I had to be, in a world where there was no alternative. Now, in terms of Kevin Warsh, those connectos are there. His outlook in terms of his theory of economics, his monetary theory of economics is not our monetary theory of economics because we're not monetarists. But then you get to something else, which is how do you interact with the physical economy? And that's why I think Trump chose Kevin Warsh to rein in the Federal Reserve and restore it more to its less destructive mission. Now, Adam, if you could just share the screen for a minute. this is a quote I actually used on the boot camp, which I think highlights why Trump picked Warsh. And again, we're in an evolving situation where people are functioning. If they choose to follow Donald Trump and actually support what Trump is doing on these fundamental questions, then I'm not particularly worried about their previous, connectos, unless they turn around and betray Donald Trump. So here's what Kevin Warsh said in an interview back in November. He said the Federal Reserve should abandon the dogma that inflation is caused when the economy grows too much and workers get paid too much. Inflation is caused when government spends too much and prints too much money. Now, you've heard Trump say this. You've heard Bannon say this. The theory that the Fed uses is if the average person is getting prosperous and there's a certain prosperity baked in, that's going to cause inflation. We got to raise interest rates and we got to crush it off. And that's just been the excuse they've used, but that's the theory. Warsh rejects that. And then the key to me is this: money on Wall Street is too easy and credit on Main Street is too tight. And that's also Bessent's position, that the way the Fed has functioned has simply been to bail out the too big to fail banks and leave everybody else in the dust. And Warsh, Bessent, Trump, and many others are saying, no, we're not going to do that any longer. Now, there's talk about reforming the Fed, making it much less easy for it to play that bailout of last resort role, which Warsh is on board with, along with Bessent. So what I see Warsh as is somebody that they're putting in to begin to narrow the mission of the Fed, clip its wings in terms of it being a complete support system for a dying financial system, and to the extent possible, conduct its policy so that it supports the flow of credit, whether it's coming from the federal government, from other institutions, or otherwise, support the flow of credit getting back out into the productive economy. I think that's what Warsh has indicated he is prepared to do. That's what Trump wants to do. Am I going to bet, my life savings on that he's going to do it? No, I'm not going to bet my life savings on anything. But the indications are that's why he's chosen. That's what he intends to do. And I'm not unhappy with this appointment.
All right. Thank you, Susan. Thank you. And thank you, everyone in the chat and on x.com. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have plenty more questions. Let's actually take this these next ones here, which I think will be interesting. All right. So this next one here is, is this the one that I wanted to take?
That's it. That and maybe the next one.
Okay. Yes. All right. Can you extrapolate a bit on why you say the free market system is not good? What do you mean by that? I always considered the free market system to be a good thing. Thank you, David, for this question. I just want to say one quick thing, which I think is most of your confusion. There's two words that unfortunately our organization uses very interchangeably, but they're different. A free and open market is different than free trade. So having a free market economy is different than having a free trade economy. So I think that is most of the confusion. We are 100% against free trade unless it's a negotiated deal. So Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on free trade versus a free market system?
Well, I might beg to disagree with you a little bit. I think there's a problem with both. And I think J.D. Vance addressed it. So I want to play that clip right now.
Know that today, the international market for critical...
Okay, there we go.
Now, we know that today, the international market for critical minerals is failing. It's failing to create domestic markets or dignified jobs for our labor forces, and it's failing to keep our nation safe. Supply chains remain brittle and exceptionally concentrated. Asset and commodity prices are persistently depressed, driven downward by forces beyond any individual country's control. Now, how many times cumulatively have one of us or many of us in this room heard some variation of the story that I'm about to tell? A lithium mine, a gallium recovery center, you name it, is announced, sometimes with years in planning and financing nearly in place. Then overnight, foreign supply floods the market, the prices collapse, and investors pull out. The project stalls, and eventually the project dies on the vine. We've all seen it firsthand in all of our countries. And the result is a global market where consistent investment is nearly impossible, and it will stay that way so long as prices are erratic and unpredictable. And that's one of the things that we want to work on with this initiative. Let's make the prices more predictable and less erratic so that we can support the domestic supply chains and the investment that makes those supply chains possible. Now, across Europe, North America, there are dozens of mining and processing initiatives that have been suspended or completely abandoned because sustained price weakness makes financing impossible. Time after time, advanced economies with deep capital markets are finding that projects cannot clear costs. The same story plays out elsewhere around the world. In resource-rich developing economies, only a tiny fraction of global mining investment, including from nations, many of them in this room, is reaching the point of actual projects. We plan, we think about it, we even invest a little bit of money, we do the regulatory work, but so many of them die on the vine. Now, everyone knows that these deposits exist. We've mapped a whole lot of them, and we know they're ready to be mined and processed. But capital can't reach them so long as investors lack confidence that those markets are going to remain stable for long enough to justify the long-term commitment. That is the problem that we confront. And even here in the United States, even with all the incredible things that President Trump and the entire administration has done to eliminate permits, to open up the regulatory environment, we have private financing that we've secured, but even in some cases, even in the United States, some of these projects are struggling to attract investors. We see telltale signs of a market distorted beyond recognition, one that punishes strategic investment, one that punishes diversification, and one that punishes long-term planning. This is crazy. We should have the kind of global markets, the kind of domestic markets that reward long-term planning, that reward strategic thinking, and that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Now, that very last part is the key. There is nothing inherent in a free market that is going to reward long-term planning, not in the real world, because there is no such thing as a free market. There is a conflict between two systems. There is an imperial system, which has been based on control of money, control of especially cartelization, control of raw materials, which sits, and as you notice, Vance at one point said, above the control of nations. And that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with an oligarchical system, which wants to game everything so that they have the ability to loot, to make all the profits, to squash everybody else, which is why we have become so vulnerable on strategic minerals, whether it's the Chinese or whether it's some, Anglo-American mining company, because they operate above countries, they can come in and undercut anybody who's trying to invest something in the United States, which is why we have become so vulnerable on strategic minerals. So what has the administration done about this? What was announced 2 days before J.D. Vance said this is the role of the Export-Import Bank to marshal financing to ensure that if somebody wants to open up a mine, a rare earths processing facility, and so on, they're going to have stable credit to do that. And we're going to ensure stable prices so that they don't spend 5 years spinning this up and then somebody crashes the price and, they lose all of their investment. The American system is what J.D. Vance is talking about and what this this new initiative the administration is carrying out. They're calling it Project Vault. And they're bringing countries from around the world in to create a repository of these strategic minerals, financed by government funding, carried out by private industry, and in an environment where you stabilize the prices so that you can ensure the producers actually get the cost of production. The free market does not ensure that you're going to get the cost of production. The free market says somebody wants to make a profit no matter what. Now, and free trade is obviously part of all of that. This is a beautiful object lesson in the American system. And I recommend that people watch the whole of J.D. Vance's speech to this strategic consortium, whatever they called it, or watch the Oval Office presentation 2 days earlier, where President Trump, Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick, and the head of the Export-Import Bank use this real life problem, which is we've been left completely vulnerable on strategic materials because of the free market system, which says all we care about is the most powerful people make a profit, and we don't care what the consequences are. Guess what? That's not the American system. The American system says we want to organize such that in partnership between government, private industry, trade unions, and actually that is said in the Oval Office, we have the kind of environment where producers can produce, cover the cost of production with an appropriate profit, be able to pay their workers a decent wage, and grow. That's the American system.
Yeah, I just want to take this retarded comment that just came in. Somebody just commented, minerals will run out. How dumb. Well, plenty of minerals will run out. There's plenty of them that are in the process of running out. And also, I'd like to say that minerals don't mind themselves. So I just wanted to comment on that. So, okay, thank you very much, Susan, for your response. Barbara, did you have anything to comment on this?
No.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us in the chat. I'm going to knock out some more super chats. So, ladies, when you take these questions, please just short answers. I still have a bunch more. We have so many people that are just sending in the support. So thank you, Fergie. Thank you. Quickfire, you guys are amazing. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for tuning in and for joining us. 57 Chap D, keep up the great work. Keep joining us every week. Get our free newsletter. Stay subscribed to be super awesome. Sir Richard Ward, thank you, brother, for supporting us today in our chat. Bill Warner, is there any chance we can get you guys on Joe Rogan? I would love for Susan and Barbara to be on Joe Rogan. That would be amazing. If you guys have any inside connections to their producers, have them reach out to us. I'm sure Barbara and Susan would absolutely love that chance. David Gray, again, thank you. We see the president is winning on so many fronts. Why doesn't he let Americans know how billions wish he was their president? I think he actually does a pretty good job of that. Thank you very much, David, for joining us every week. And I'd like to give a shout out to Philip Lancaster for the very generous super chat. So we can take this question real quick. How far can Congress go in regulating elections, given the Constitution's giving states control over the times, places, and manner of holding elections? And we can take. I can take some more. I can take another questions on the SAVE Act after this. Would the SAVE Act be approved by SCOTUS? I think that should be by the Supreme. Yeah, by the Supreme Court. Excuse me. And then let me just take question 17 here. We'll just group that in here on the SAFE Act. I have a question. If the deportations reduce the left-wing voter base and everyone responsible for the 2020 steal has been arrested and combine that with too big to rig, do we still need the SAFE Act? So thank you, James, and thank you, Philip, for both of your questions here on the SAFE Act. So Barbara and Susan, please, your thoughts and comments.
Yeah, we still need the SAVE Act under these circumstances. We require ID to do anything practically, and that's a good system when we're talking about the vote, which determines everything. Will the Supreme Court come down on the side of the SAVE Act in terms of this constitutional provision in terms of time, place, and manner? Good question. I think it's very likely that it will come down in favor of the SAVE Act, because it's not strictly a complete states' rights issue in terms of the Supreme Court corpus of decisions involving that. So, yeah, I think the Democrats want to argue that this is exclusively the states' role or the role of referendums, etc. I think Congress has to have a say in how the executive branch and the Congress themselves are actually elected in terms of the federal government. And I don't think our founders intended to essentially say everything is in the reservoir over here of the state in terms of running elections.
Any thoughts, Susan?
No, I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, the question of voter ID is such a ridiculous issue, you know, with the Democrats saying it's racist. I once saw a video of somebody went out and just interviewed a bunch of random, you know, Black and Hispanic people, you know, on the streets of Los Angeles. And they said, what do they think? You know, what do they think? We're stupid? We don't know how to get ID? We have to use ID all the time. I mean, it's just such an absurd narrative. And we all know how the lack of voter ID has been used. So it needs to be passed. And I think Barbara's right in terms of this particular issue. I mean, as I understand it, just to clarify it, the way the SAVE Act works, it only applies to federal elections. So if you have a local election, if they pass it and you have a local election with no federal election attached, you know, they may still get away with no voter ID, but as long as you're involved in an election to a federal office, it's supposed to apply to that.
Thank you very much, Susan. Next, I'd like to give a shout out to Daisy Coca, MAGA Patriots running against the rhinos. Just the competition alone will change rhinos' current behavior.
Very, very astute. I like that.
Thank you. Again, please make sure you're subscribed to our channel, get our free newsletter. Cancer Moonchild came in late, but I will watch the reply. I enjoy all your shows and tell as many people as I can about Promethean. You all are the best. Thank you. And you're the best too. Everyone in the chat, everyone who's watching, all 3,000 people, 3,100 people plus that are watching, thank you so much for your support. Really, we couldn't do any of this unless we all act together. And thank you for joining in action with us to try and get all this great change in the world done. Eyes wide open. I'm spreading your videos and channel everywhere. I love and appreciate your work so much. Barbara and Susan inspire me. Thank you all. Please, eyes wide open, get our free newsletter. If you're effective on making social media videos, please reach out to me on x.com and maybe we can work together and you can help us bring our message to an even wider audience. Thank you, Lily. I saw you talking a bunch in the chat. Really appreciate it. Hi from the Viper's Nest, aka the UK. Been watching a while. Love what you do. By the way, really enjoy watching our vile dictator Starmer squirm over Mandelson. Yes, I haven't even been watching the news. That he could literally be out by the time we're done. And I would feel so awesome. Starmer, just seeing what he's done with all of the censorship, just the censorship alone, people getting thrown into jail for mean tweets. God, I hope you guys can find a new prime minister, somebody who's going to help you work together to get all that censorship stuff has to go. So thank you, Lily, for joining us. Please get our free newsletter. Josh Winston, thank you for joining us. Do you think everyday voters will feel a significant economic bump in their wallets by summer, whether it's by tax returns or tax dividends? Thank you for all you do, team. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this one. Do you guys expect to see some kind of bump to most Americans by this summer?
Well, I certainly think the administration does. I mean, I think the dividend question is going to be pretty significant. I think that's going to be the first place people feel it. If they had, taxes withheld, they're going to be surprised at how much they get back this year as opposed to previous years. Whether there's going to be tariff checks, I think that's may still have to go through Congress. So that's often a crapshoot as far as that goes. But as Treasury Secretary Bessent has stressed, as I think also Howard Lutnick, I think people are going to start to be feeling it, not just from the money consumer side of it. And obviously that's where you kind of feel it fastest and it feels the most good. You know, oh my gosh, I got more money. But I think the more fundamental thing is as more and more people are brought back into the productive workforce. And with the factory starts that have been spun up at the end of last year, they'll continue in the South, you know, through the winter. I'm sure there's no factory starts going on here in Michigan where it's 10 degrees right now. But I think Secretary Bessent has indicated he thinks by the second quarter, you're going to see a lot more hiring in terms of manufacturing in the United States. And again, I think more fundamental than just, I'm going to get some money back, which we all want and we all need, and it feels really good, is people recognizing that they have a stable, prosperous future opening up before them. That it's not just, oh my God, I just got a chunk of money from the IRS, which is going to get me through the next month. But rather, I'm going to get a job. As I mentioned earlier, those Texas candidates talking about what happens when you graduate from one of these apprenticeship programs. You walk out the door and you got a $60,000 a year job, for starters, with benefits. And the more people who begin to enter that world, where they have, again, this kind of permanent stability, where they're being productive, where they're part of a society that is confident about the future, I think that's going to start to kick in over the course of next year. We're going to do everything we can to amplify it, especially through Promethean PAC. And if we can magnify what is actually going on, along with people beginning to feel it in these different kinds of ways, I think that'll have an enormous effect on the midterms. Adam, I got a text while we were talking. Someone would like us to put the Promethean PAC website up again and then show that you need to scroll down to get to the latest articles because it wasn't that obvious.
Okay, everyone, it's obvious. If you just go to Promethean PAC and scroll down,
you
will see you will see it. Okay.
Yeah,
thank you. Thank you very much, Susan. And thank you very much, Josh Winston, for your insightful comment and question. Please make sure you're subscribed to our channel. Shelley, what can we do to get Trump to step in and put Gavin Newsom in jail? Shelley, I understand your sentiment. We really, really do. But saying, how do we just put somebody in jail is literally a mental shortcut. We have to actually do the hard work and make that a reality. To put Gavin Newsom in jail, that means we're going to have to organize popular support for it. It means you're going to have to get the prosecutor. You're going to have to get all the legal stuff in action. All that requires political organizing.
And
so,
always the real question is, what are you going to replace him with? You know, somebody who's, you know, maybe not as slick as he is, but just as bad?
I think I'm not following, but I don't follow it a lot. But I know there actually are some Republicans that are trying to do something really awesome. I don't know who they are, but I know there are some Republican candidates that are trying to do something real with California.
Actually, we'll be featuring some of them on our next boot camp on February 13th.
Yeah. So, Shelley, consider going to Promethean PAC and subscribing for our next boot camp. The sign-up form is in the upper right-hand corner of the website, and join us on our next boot camp. And this is a really special one. Thank you, Mark Shawnee, for the $500.
Thank you.
$500 donation. That's the biggest one we've ever got. I think that's the largest you can do on YouTube. Please make sure you're on. I need to make sure, Mark, that you get our free newsletter. The link is in the description. If you can, you need to be part of our midterm boot camp. We need people, serious people, to be a part of it. Please at least get our free newsletter and let us stay in contact with you, because we are really trying to do something awesome in this midterms with Promethean PAC and Promethean Action. So thank you very much. This helps us and allows us to do what we do, your donations like that. So thank you very, very, very much, Mark, for the generous donation. Okay, thank you, Shell. Let's do a quick one. Again, this is another question that keeps coming up. What do you think about whatever everyone keeps talking about Donald Trump's son-in-law, Kushner? And yes, people say so many terrible things about him, but that man is literally doing God's work on peace negotiation. Barbara and Susan, can you just say a few things about this? Because I think he really takes a lot of bad words, that guy.
I think if you're interested in actually looking at Jared and what he's accomplished, you should, if you're really interested in defending him, you should read a book by Barack Ravid called Trump's Peace, in which he actually talks about Jared's role in the Middle East, beginning to set up the situation we have now. We have peace in the Middle East for the first time in decades and decades and decades. All right. And what he did, which most people don't know the story of, is in Trump's first term, Jared and Trump conducted a listening tour, just like I'd suggest a lot of Republicans need to be doing right now with the workers in their districts, except they went to all of the countries in the Middle East and they said, you know, how do you see the future of this area? What's the mission for this area? How do you actually think we can end the wars in this area? And most importantly, Trump said to Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, you guys being used as terrorists by the Anglo-American intelligence establishment, that role is over. We're not doing terrorism anymore under my watch. Doesn't mean that wasn't true of the British and the Europeans. They're still doing it, all right? But Trump said the United States ain't doing this anymore. And Jared was critical in that listening tour to actually making friends and establishing relationships with all of the Gulf states leaders and saying, show the world what the Gulf states can do in terms of economic development. And they've done that. They diversified their economies out of oil and actually gotten into overall economic and social development of the entire area. That laid the basis for the Abraham Accords, which is Jared's term, the three Abrahamic religions actually coming into being as a block to end all of the endless wars in the Middle East. So I look at his accomplishments, and people talk about him, quite frankly, very often from a very anti-Semitic standpoint, in the sense that he is an Orthodox Jew, all right? No question about that, but representing the very best of Jewish culture and history. So that's what I'd say about that question.
Thank you, Susan. Gosh. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you so much. Oh, my dyslexia always gets the best of me. Okay. Quick shout out here. Thank you very much, Cool Mom, for joining us. We really appreciate your support. Smith Trotter, thank you very much. We have a free newsletter. The link is in the description. Please make sure you get our free newsletter. And another very generous super chat. This is another good question. It gives us a chance to talk more about Promethean PAC. So thank you very much for the $100 donation. Jim Wu, do you have an economic goal for the Political Action Committee? Barbara, why don't you say a few words on this? It'll give us a chance to recap some of what we've been talking about.
Yeah, if I had a budget where we could basically hire at will people who would work with social media and help us craft the economic messaging which we need to get out there in terms of the midterms, and that's a significant, budget in terms of scaling up where we need to get. So if I had a proposal, I'd say, yeah, we need to raise as much money as possible to get us out there, both in terms of an ability to train on the ground organizers. All right. That if you look at that Texas election, going door to door, actually listening to what the voters wanted to say, actually listening to what they wanted as their mission, and being able to adjust your messaging on the spot, which is what they did to accommodate that, beat out, a candidate who had millions and millions and millions of dollars. All right. So that's one aspect of what I'd like to do. What I'd also like to do is to be able to really make a lot of very inspirational social media and other types of short video content for and against candidates, and to be able to effectively use that and saturate the airways with it. That's what a PAC can do. We can support or oppose candidates, and we can do so independent of coordinating with the candidates' campaigns with whatever amount of money we can raise. Like, you know, we can spend $100,000 on a video production, for example, against a candidate if we have the funds to actually do so. So those are my two sort of directionalities that I want to take the PAC almost immediately in terms of building it up and scaling it up. It's going to take a lot of thinking, since right now we're small and we're at ground zero. We have all the great ideas, but we have to effectively package them and get them out there in a way that only money, in a certain sense, at this point, can buy.
Thank you, Barbara. So just a quick recap. Get our free newsletter with Promethean Action. The link is for that. It's in the description. We have a sister organization, Promethean PAC. On that website, in the upper right-hand corner, there should be a sign up in the menu to join the midterms, our midterm boot camp. Sign up for that too, and you'll get email notifications when we hold our next midterm boot camp, which is more towards accomplishing political goals in the midterm. So thank you very much, Jim, for your support. And this last one here from a friend in Quebec. As a French-speaking person, we have a big problem with the British Empire for almost 300 years. We need your help. Thanks in advance. Okay, so before we close, I just want to say we can try to help you guys with the history, but there's a certain amount of internal political organizing you guys are going to have to organize there in France. And we know how hard to do this is, but it's really the only way to move any nation forward that's facing this issue of having to throw off the chains of globalization. They have to be internal national movements to throw off the chains of globalization. Barbara and Susan, your thoughts on this?
What you said.
Absolutely.
You're muted
yourself.
Thank you very much. Okay, Shelley, I know, and we didn't talk so much about the Iran. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. We didn't talk so much about the Iran. Can women in their 30s get help getting into a trade, whether in trade school or an apprentice? Probably.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you, Jan, for last minute super chat. We're going to be back next Thursday. I urge everyone to get our free newsletter. Check out our Promethean PAC website. The website's kind of lean, but we're going to be building it out over coming weeks and months. Thank you, everyone, for your support. We'll see you again next week. Bye.